What remains is not the truth of what happened, but what grief became after years of silence. Welcome back to the Nocturnal Nook. I'm Lady Moonveil, and I see you've returned back to the archives. Tonight's recording unfolds across 10 perspectives, 10 fragments of the same night, each one bringing us closer to the tragedy that changed their lives forever. Now listen carefully, because once it begins, you will not be able to trust what you hear. POV 1. Mark. The fog didn't lift once in the entire 2 hours. We left the highway around 4 in the afternoon, and somewhere between the exit and the dirt road, the mist just thickened. It pressed against the windshield like it was trying to keep us out. Or keep us in, I couldn't tell anymore. No one talked in the car. For the entire journey, we sat silent in that vehicle. David and Chloe in the front, 3 of us in the back seat, and rest in the car behind. And we didn't say her name even once. Clara. I thought it constantly, but no one said it. The gravel driveway came up so suddenly the car jolted when we turned onto it. Trees leaned in from both sides, their branches hanging low enough that they scraped the roof, and then the fog parted just enough to show us what we had rented. The cabin was modern, all timber and glass and expensive restraint. The kind of place that looked like someone had read an architectural magazine and decided nature should be framed rather than experienced. 30 feet from the shoreline, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the lake. David cut the engine, the fog rushed back in immediately, turning the view outside into a grey wall. Well, David said from the front seat, here we are. No one moved to unpack. I was the first to grab my bags, something to do with my hands, something that required motion and purpose. I carried them up the wooden stairs to the master bedroom, and every footfall sounded too loud on the pine. The whole cabin seemed to be listening. The bedroom was cold, not chilled from air conditioning. This was a different kind of cold, the kind that lives in a space where people don't stay long enough to make it warm. I unzipped my duffel bag and reached for the heavy wool sweater I'd packed. My hand stopped. The fabric wasn't damp from the fog. It was heavy, unnaturally dense, like it had been pulled from the bottom of something. A lake or a river. Something dark and still. I held it up. No water dripped. No puddles formed on the carpet. But when I dragged my thumb across the weave, it felt slick, greasy, like something had already been living in it. I sat it on the bed and turned the thermostat to 75. The heater kicked on with a mechanical wheeze. But the air in the room didn't warm. If anything, the heat made it worse. It drew moisture up from somewhere, turning the room thick and suffocating. I could taste it on my tongue, like breathing through a damp cloth, like the air itself had weight. I sat on the edge of the mattress to pull off my boots. The bedsheets didn't rustle when I sat down. They clung to me. Guess we have to blame moisture for it too. Downstairs, I could hear others moving around the kitchen. The clink of glasses, someone trying to force a laugh. The kind of laugh that breaks before it starts. I stood at the window of the master bedroom and looked out toward the lake. The fog was so dense I couldn't see the water, but I could feel it out there, the heaviness of it. And for a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn I heard something. Not a sound, something else, a presence. The way you can feel someone standing behind you in a dark room before you turn around. I almost called her name. Instead, I went downstairs to join the others. POV 2. Chloe. I didn't know Clara. I was here because David asked me to come, and he needed someone who wasn't drowning in 4 years of guilt. While the guys were upstairs with luggage, I stood by the kitchen counter trying to fill a glass from the tap. The water ran cloudy at first, thick with something grey and silt-colored. I almost poured it out. Then it cleared, not gradually, it just stopped being dirty. The kitchen was already suffocating, the kind of quiet where you can hear someone breathing in the next room. I reached for the ceramic salt shaker on the counter. When I turned it over into my palm, nothing came out. I unscrewed the cap. The salt inside hadn't clumped because of humidity. It had dissolved into a solid grey paste, like it had been underwater for years. That's when I realized something was actually wrong with this place. Not wrong like ghosts are real. Wrong like the air itself was making things decompose, making things damp and heavy. I watched them gather in the living room as the sun died behind the mountain. All of them sitting on leather couches that probably cost more than my car, pouring drinks with this manic energy, laughing too loud at things that weren't funny, asking each other about jobs and apartments like they hadn't all come here to sit in silence about a dead girl. David caught my eye across the room. He looked destroyed, not sad, destroyed, like something had already been taken from him, and he was waiting for it to take the rest. I excused myself to the kitchen and drank my water standing at the sink, looking out at the grey blanket beyond the window. These people weren't ready to talk about her. They weren't even meeting each other's eyes. They were afraid of each other, afraid of what they all knew and couldn't say, afraid of what would happen if someone finally named the thing they came here to bury. and I was watching the pressure build in that room like I was watching a pot of water about to boil over. One of them was going to break, and when they did, everything was going to get worse before it got better. POV 3. Sarah. I lasted until 6 o'clock. By then, the small talk had become obscene. Jobs and apartments and how was your drive. When we were all sitting in a cabin 30 feet from the water that killed one of us. When we were all carrying the same stone in our chests. I stood by the bay window watching the fog press against the glass, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't sit on that damp leather couch and pretend. Who actually sent the invitations? My voice cut through their chatter like a knife. Matt froze. Mark looked down at his lap. I told you, Sarah, Mark said finally. His voice was flat. He still wasn't looking at me. The email group, our college thread, we coordinated this months ago. A weekend near the lake, to honor. I didn't coordinate anything. I cut him off. I got a digital flyer 3 weeks ago with a confirmation code for this exact cabin. No sender name, no explanation. Just a date and coordinates and some message about honoring her memory. And when I asked the owner downstairs, he told Chloe he doesn't use any rental agency. He said someone paid him cash 6 months ago to leave the keys under the mat. The room went silent. The kind of silence that has teeth. So either one of you is lying about how this happened, or someone else brought us here. Someone who wanted all of us in this cabin, on this lake, on the day Clara died. Jessica shifted uncomfortably on the love seat. Her eyes went to the dark hallway like something was standing there. Sarah, you're spiraling, Ashley said. Her voice had that careful quality people use when they think you're losing it. It's an anniversary weekend. We all agreed. We didn't agree to anything we can't explain, I said. And we're all acting like that's normal? Like we didn't just drive 2 hours in silence because we cannot stand what we're about to remember? And now you're telling me none of you know who actually sent out the invitations? Mark finally looked at me. His face was pale. Sarah, stop. You're making this worse. Worse than what? I asked. Worse than the fact that Clara has been dead for 4 years and the only reason we've gathered again is because someone orchestrated it? Worse than whatever we're all not saying about what happened that night? The fire in the living room crackled. It sounded too loud. She didn't like going in the water, David said quietly. His hands were shaking. That's what we all knew, and yet she wouldn't have gone in on her own. There's no way she would have. He stopped, like he'd said too much. That's not what happened, I said, and I was watching them all now, really watching them. What happened that night was a mistake, something we've all spent 4 years not talking about, and now someone has decided it's time to talk about it. POV 4. Matt. The tension in that room was going to get someone killed. Not literally, but Sarah was pushing, and Mark was shutting down, and David looked like he was about to confess to something or shatter completely. One more accusation, and we were going to start actually arguing about what happened 4 years ago. I couldn't let that happen. All right, that's enough, I said, clapping my hands together like I was calling a meeting to order. Sarah's right, the vibe is completely unhinged. We're scaring ourselves to death over invitations and coincidences. If we're going to freak out tonight, we might as well do it properly. I leaned forward and lit a cigarette. The humidity in the room swallowed the flame before I could get it to my face. I cursed, tossed the dead match into the fireplace, and forced a grin. You guys haven't heard the actual history of this valley, have you? The real story, not just local legend. Ryan frowned. Matt, don't. My uncle hunted up here for years, I continued, ignoring him. Used to come back with stories about the area, weird stuff. You see that ridge up on the hill, past the tree line on the north side? That's where Blackwood Manor used to be. The Ashcrofts owned it. Historic estate. But the place had a reputation. I paused, let the silence sit for a moment. They said the family that lived there started going mad, like actually mad. There was a fire in 1980, burned the whole manor down, killed most of the family. The Ashcrofts rebuilt it afterward, changed the name to Blackwood Manor after the fire. Ironic, right? But the locals never forgot what happened here. What happened? Jessica asked. Her voice was smaller than before. No one really knows, but my uncle said the water around here got weird after the fire. Like the whole valley changed. People would come fishing and talk about feeling depressed, guilty about things they had no reason to feel guilty about. The lake was supposed to be beautiful, but everyone said it felt heavy. I lit another cigarette. This time the flame caught. The story goes that when the manor burned, all the ash filtered down through the soil and ended up in the water table, corrupted it somehow. My uncle never believed in supernatural nonsense, but he wouldn't fish here. Said the place made him feel things he didn't want to feel. I expected someone to call me out, to tell me I was being dramatic or that I was making it worse. Instead, Jessica said, "What kind of things?" "Guilt," I said. Like the lake was reminding you of all the things you've done wrong, all the people you'd hurt, all the choices you'd made that you couldn't take back. The fire crackled. Someone's breathing got heavier. That's local folklore bullshit, Ashley said suddenly. Her voice was sharp and cutting. My cousin lived here for 2 years. She said it was a beautiful place, nothing weird about it. It's a story people tell to keep tourists from moving in. Maybe, I said. I wasn't sure anymore. The way the room had reacted, the way Jessica was looking at the window now, made me wonder if I'd made a mistake bringing it up. David still wasn't moving. He was staring at the fire like it could tell him something. And Chloe was watching all of us, with that expression she got when she was trying to figure out if everyone around here was crazy, or if she was missing something important. Doesn't matter if it's real or not, she said finally. We're not here because of some haunted water legend. We're here because someone sent invitations. That's a human problem. And we still don't know who did it. She was right, but Sarah's questions hung in the air anyway, and my uncle's theory about guilt filtering up through the water sat there like a seed that had already started growing roots. The fog pressed harder against the windows, and somewhere in the darkness outside, or maybe in the darkness inside the cabin, something was waiting. POV 5. David. I told her she couldn't do it. That's what I keep thinking about. Not the part where she actually went in, not the part where the water took her. Just that moment where she was standing at the edge, scared out of her mind, and I said, Clara, you can't even do that. You're terrified of water. I meant it as a joke. Like, come on, look at yourself, you're shaking. But Clara always took things literally. She always tried to prove people wrong about her. Chloe was upstairs when I left the cabin. I told her I needed air. That was true. The atmosphere in that living room was suffocating. But the real reason I went down to the dock was because I'd been hearing something, or feeling something. A presence that kept pulling my attention toward the water. The fog was so thick I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. The dock appeared out of the grey like it was being drawn up from below. The wood was slick, not wet from rain. It hadn't rained, slick like something had been moving across it, something that left a residue. I stood at the end of the dock and looked out at the water. It was moving, not waves. The surface was too still for that. But there was a kind of undulation, like the lake was breathing. And then I heard her. David. Just my name. Soft. The way she used to say it when she was small and wanted something from me. Before everything got heavy. Before the lake. I turned around. There was nothing there but fog. But I could feel her presence at the edge of the dock. I could feel her the way you feel cold air before winter fully arrives. David, look at me. I turned back to face the water. A pale shape was forming in the fog. Not a face at first, just the suggestion of a face. Hollow eyes, blue lips, hair that hung like waterlogged cloth. It was Clara, or what was left of her. She was reaching up toward me, both hands breaking the surface of the water. Her fingers were long and wrong, stretched like they'd been underwater for so long they'd started to change shape. I didn't move, I didn't run, I didn't scream. I just stared at her and felt the crushing weight of what I'd done, what we'd all done, and what we'd failed to do. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean, I was just... David. But this time it wasn't Clara's voice. It was a man's voice, coming from behind me, and it was pulling me backward toward the shore. I felt hands on my shoulder, firm, real. And then there was nothing but the sound of the water, and the weight of something I couldn't fight, and the understanding that I had walked directly into something I should have seen coming. POV 6. Lucas. I needed to get away from the living room before the tension cracked into actual violence. Matt's story about the corrupted lake had done something to the group. It made Sarah's accusation feel less crazy. It made the fog outside feel less accidental. And it made David look like he was about to say something that would make every one of us fall even deeper in guilt. And suddenly the light started flickering. So I excused myself to check the breaker panel. Frankly, a reason to get away from here. The basement door was in the kitchen, next to the pantry. I opened it and a gust of cold air rolled up the wooden stairs. It smelled like nothing I'd ever smelled before. Not earth, not mold, something ancient and still. Something that had been underwater for a very long time. As I stepped in, lights went out completely. I descended with my phone flashlight, cutting a narrow beam through the dark. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floors, exposed wooden beams. The breaker box was on the far wall, exactly where it should be. I opened it. The wires had been cut. Not corroded, not damaged by the moisture, cut with precision, clean diagonal slices through the insulation. Someone was in this cabin. I should have run back upstairs. I should have shouted for Mark. But a strange suffocating exhaustion was settling over me, the kind of heaviness that came from the water itself, or from the guilt. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. I turned to head back up the stairs. That's when I heard the voice. It came from the crawl space at the back of the basement, the narrow cave where the foundation met the lowest point of the building, where the water table would seep in during heavy rains. Lucas. A girl's voice. Soft. Clara? I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Why did you let me go? I turned my flashlight toward the cave. The beam cut through the darkness and illuminated something pale at the very edge of the opening. A face, waterlogged, eyes like black pools. Clara was reaching toward me from the crawl space. I should have been terrified. I should have run. But the same weight that had settled over the cabin was settling over me now. A crushing, humid pressure that made movement seem pointless. I walked toward her, not voluntarily, but I couldn't stop myself. "You tried to save me," she whispered, "but you didn't try hard enough." I reached the gap, I bent down, and I could see deeper into the crawl space now. I could see where it connected to the stone doors that led out to the shore. I could see the path that led from the basement directly to the water. And I understood, in that moment, that the lake had been waiting for me to come down here. And the last thing I felt was the cold. POV 7. Jessica. The fire in the living room had died. I noticed it because no one was feeding it. Matt had told his story. Chloe had dismissed it. Sarah had looked vindicated in a way that made everything worse. And then David excused himself. Then Lucas. And no one seemed to find it strange that they weren't coming back. I stood and went to find them. The kitchen was empty. The basement door was open. A cold draft rolling up from below. I called Lucas's name. Nothing. David wasn't in any of the upstairs bedrooms. His jacket was still on the couch by the front window. His keys were still on the table. But David was gone. That's when I noticed the window. In the dining room, looking out toward the driveway, there was a handprint pressed against the glass from the outside. A pale, waterlogged hand. Small. A girl's hand. I walked toward it very slowly. Clara's face materialized against the glass. Her eyes were entirely black. Her skin was smooth and grey, like it had been polished by water and time. And her mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear through the barrier of the window. I stepped closer. Her mouth formed a single word. Run. I spun around. The dining room was dark. The hallway that led to the living room was darker. And standing at the threshold, black-lit by a faint glow of the dying fire, was a silhouette. A man. Heavy. Real. He was holding something. Long and flat. Metal. It caught the firelight for just a moment. A steel hammer. And I finally understood why Clara had come to warn me. Or had she come to keep me distracted? I didn't scream. I ran. I bolted past the figure, past the men, toward the back of the cabin. There was a hallway there, a door that led to the deck. I heard his footsteps behind me, heavy and methodical, not rushing, certain. I reached for the door handle. It was locked. I turned to face him. He was close now, close enough that I could see his face, young, pale, hollow-eyed, and utterly, completely alone in whatever was driving him forward. I opened my mouth to scream. But the sound that came out wasn't a scream. It was the sound of water, deep, resonant, coming from inside my own chest, and the men stepped forward. POV 8. Ryan. The hallway closet smelled like old fabric and dust. I'd pulled the door almost shut behind me when I heard Jessica started running. I was watching through the slats when he came up from the basement. He moved like he knew exactly where he was going, like he'd been in this cabin before, like he'd memorized every floorboard and every shadow. He was carrying a steel hammer, holding it like it was an extension of his arm, something he'd learned to use so well it didn't require conscious thought anymore. When he stepped into the faint light of the dying fire, I saw his face. Thomas, Clara's cousin. The quiet one who used to watch us from the edge whenever we were at Clara's home. The one who'd showed up at the funeral looking destroyed, asking questions we wouldn't answer. He was looking for someone. His eyes scanned the room systematically. When he didn't find them, he moved toward the dining room, toward where Jessica had run. I held my breath. I could hear him moving through the cabin, methodical, not searching randomly. He seemed to know exactly where people would run, where they would hide. He'd thought about this. He'd planned it all out. The steel hammer made a sound when it hit something solid. A wet sound. A body hitting something sound. Then silence. He came back through the living room and headed upstairs. His footsteps were heavy on the stairs. Deliberate. He wasn't trying to sneak anymore. He knew no one was going to stop him. I sat in the darkness of the closet and understood with perfect clarity that I was going to die in this cabin. The only question was whether it would be quick or if he would make it slow. POV 9. Ashley. I ran in the wrong direction. I should have headed for the front door. I should have made a straight line for the cars and tried to get them started despite the ruined tires. But I was disoriented. The cabin seemed to shift in the dark. The hallways led places they shouldn't have led. I ended up in the laundry room, a dead end with a single window too small to fit through. That's when I saw the bodies. Mark was on the basement stairs, his neck at an angle that made it clear his neck had been broken. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Sarah was in the mudroom by the back door. She'd made it farther than I had. She'd actually gotten to the exit. But he'd caught her there. Her body was crumpled against the wall, and there was blood on the window behind her where her head had hit. I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I couldn't move. I was looking at Sarah's face and thinking about how angry she'd been, how right she'd been about the invitations, how none of us had believed her when it actually mattered. The footsteps got closer. I forced myself to move. I grabbed a broom from the corner. Useless. But it was something to hold. And I backed toward the window. If I could break it, if I could squeeze through somehow, if I could just get outside and into the fog, maybe I could lose him in the dark. The door to the laundry room opened. It was Thomas. He was breathing hard and his hands were slick, not with sweat, with something darker. "Where are the rest?" he asked. His voice was so quiet, almost conversational. "I don't know," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. "They went different directions." "No, they didn't," he said. "I've accounted for all of them, except Chloe." He stepped toward me. "Thomas, please," I started. "You were there," he said. His voice cracked slightly, like he was about to cry. "You were all there. You let her go into the water. You watched her drown. You told the police it was an accident. You told her father it was an accident. But you all knew she was terrified. We tried to save her," I said. We went in after her. We tried." But he was already swinging. I brought the broom up, but it didn't matter. The steel hammer came through the wooden handle like it wasn't there. And then it came through me. POV 10. Thomas. They are finally paying off for their crimes. Mark, Sarah, Jessica, Ashley, Lucas, David. 6 names crossed off the list. 6 people who were there when Clara went into the water. 6 people who didn't save her when they could have. I stood in the laundry room, listening to the cabin settle around me, and I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just the weight of what I'd done, and the understanding that it wouldn't bring her back. I'd spent 4 years planning this. 4 years researching their lives, their locations, how to send invitations that looked authentic, how to build a trap that would work because they all wanted it to work. They all wanted closure, and I gave them a reason to come. The hardest part was locating this cabin. It had to be near the lake. It had to be isolated. It had to be expensive enough that they wouldn't question paying for it. It took me 6 months to find it, another 6 months to arrange the rental, another month to plan the geometry of the room so I'd know exactly where they'd try to hide. They were so predictable. They talked about closure. Closure over what? A murder? But where was Matt? And Chloe? And how much does she know? This night was supposed to end only one way, with all of them dead and me standing at the dock, finally able to tell Clara I'd done it, that I'd made them answer for what they'd done. I heard movement in the living room. Footsteps. 2 people moving with their breaths held. Chloe and Matt. I stepped through the doorway and looked at them, standing by the bay window, watching the fog and the darkness beyond. "It's done," I said. They turned to face me. Chloe's face was a mask of rage, pure, cold anger. She'd found David. I could tell by the way she was holding her body. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was steady. "Why did you kill them?" "Because they killed Clara." The words felt hollow in my mouth, even though I'd rehearsed them 1,000 times. Because they watched her go into the water and none of them tried to save her. Because they went to the police and lied. Because they never answered for what they did. "We didn't kill her," Matt said. "Thomas, I was there. It was an accident. Clara was terrified of water, yes, we knew that. But it was just a joke. We didn't think Clara would take it seriously. We even tried letting her out of the dare, but she insisted. She wanted to prove that she could do it. Because you people made her feel like she had something to prove, like her fear was weakness. So she proved you wrong. You all put her to it. That's murder." "No, that's a dare that went wrong," Chloe cut in. "All of them tried, but you've spent 4 years convincing yourself they didn't. You've spent 4 years alone plotting revenge. You killed everyone. You killed my David." She stood in front of Matt, shielding him, who started backing away. "Give me the weapon. Matt is innocent. Just think about Clara. She wouldn't want this. You hadn't even met her. You weren't even there. How can she defend them when she didn't understand what I'd lost, what I'd carried alone?" The rage started bubbling in me, the kind I didn't even recognize as mine. Matt was standing by the window. Chloe was closer, near the kitchen entrance, and the steel hammer was already in my hands. "You're going to understand," I said. "You're going to understand what it feels like to suffocate. You're going to feel it before you die." I moved toward them. Matt went for the kitchen counter looking for something, a knife, anything. But Chloe was already moving. She grabbed a piece of firewood from the hearth and stepped directly into my path. "You're not killing anyone else," she said. That's when I swung. She ducked. I came at Chloe again. Steel hammer was heavy in my hands. It had the weight of justice in it, the weight of all those years. She grabbed for it. We struggled. Matt came from the side. I saw the knife before it went in. I felt it catch on bone, on something vital. I fell to the floor, blood gushing through me. I felt pain, but pain was secondary to the rightness of what I'd done. Chloe was crying now, shaking. Or maybe I was. The room was spinning. The floor was coming up to meet me. So this is how it ends, I thought. This is the price of avenging her. This is what justice cost. I looked at Chloe's face one last time. At the shadow there. At the understanding that she was the killer now. That they both were. That I'd made them into something they didn't want to be. And I felt, in that moment, like I'd succeeded. Because they would carry this. They would carry the weight of what they'd done to me. They would remember this night forever. Like just I've remembered the night Clara died. Just like I've carried it every single day since. The water was waiting. I could feel it even now. As my vision darkened, the lake was patient. It could wait. It could wait forever. And when they put me in it, when they carried my body to the dock and let the water have me, I would finally be with her again. The lake would claim me like it had claimed her. And so it ends, the way it always does. Not with answers, but with what the mind chooses to carry afterward. The lake does not forget, and neither do those who stand too close to it. If you're still here with me, then perhaps you understand what this place truly is. Not a story, not a warning, but a memory that refuses to stay buried. Sleep well, wanderers, or don't, because our story doesn't end here, and some places are patient enough to wait for you.